What's up, guys? The Hack Artist is here, and we are back with another episode of Stories No One Asked For, which was originally going to be a like a retrospective on how I made my second book, Between Dreams and Waking. It's still going to be that, but it's also going to be like a clarification type of thing too, because there's been some issues. So yeah, but before we get into that, of course, we got to give a shout out to the great people over at MoviesRUSA.biz. If you don't know who they are, they're a great site where you can go on over and find those hard to find movies or those movies that are on streaming services that people refuse to put on physical media, whether it be Blu-ray, DVD, 4K, VHS, a Super Nintendo cartridge, whatever it may be. And they have them for a great, reasonable price. And if you go over there and you're like, this price just isn't great and reasonable enough for me, well, hell, you can give them my checkout code, ARTIST, ARTIST, at checkout, and save 50% on the entire purchase. That's right, not just on one item, the entire purchase. And you know what? Just because you're listening to this podcast and I like you, well, some of you with the face, not really. And you who called me a hack, you're a cunt. You don't get the free shipping, okay? But everybody else, you're going to get free shipping, okay? Plus your 50% off. So head on over to moviesrusa.biz and find those hard-to-find movies, TV shows, and if they don't have what you're looking for, just let them know. He might be able to find it for you and slap it on a disc for you. Let him know the artist sent you. All right, let's get into the episode here, because there's a lot to go over here. It is about my my most recent book, believe it or not, Between Dreams and Waking. Now, in order to talk about Between Dreams and Waking, I actually have to go back to my first book, which is actually how this podcast, eventually came to be. My first book, back in 2020, it became one of those things where, like, I was always telling stories on YouTube, and like I even had a short video series for a while called Storytime, where I would pick a random story. It was a podcast before a podcast, really. It was just me sitting in front of the camera, like, remember this funny shit, or weird shit, whatever it may be. And eventually, like one day, I was like, I could just take all these stories and just put them into a book, type of thing, And the thing was, I didn't know the first thing about writing a book. I've read a few, but I didn't know the first thing about writing one. So I sat down. And just started writing them. I picked out some stories that I thought would be interesting for the book, and I just started writing them. The problem was, is that I wrote it with I don't want to say mannerisms, because like that, I guess that'd be a good word for it, because I wrote it with the inflection of like I'm talking on this podcast now. Like it wasn't like a well thought out process. It's just me riffing on paper, essentially. So, you know how they say sometimes, whatever comes out of the camera, that's what appeared on film. That's essentially what the book was. It was just like whatever came out of my brain is what came on the paper, And I would go back and try and like edit it, like, okay, I forgot a word here. I skipped a word, because sometimes your brain moves faster than your hands, when you're typing. And, I eventually got it done, and it still just was not, good. Story-wise, people like the stories, but like readability-wise, I guess would be the problem. But overall, I made a tiny, tiny bit of profit on it, which is weird, because you could only buy it through me. And, spoiler alert, Between Dreams and Waking is available on many platforms, and it did not do as well as Stories No One Asked For. But, once it got out there, I was like, man, this actually was kind of fun. There were some speed bumps in there, but I was like, what would be a good idea for a second book? And, I've worked a couple retail jobs, and I was like, that's it. I'll tell stories from, like, my job, like weird, kooky job stories and shit. And I actually got about, I want to say, a little over halfway done with that before I got to one story where I was just, it's a story on my life. And I was just like, I don't know how to keep telling this story to where it's interesting. And I just gave up, So, so eventually, like, I had a couple more ideas where I was like, oh, okay, I can make this a book. And then I was like, I'll just make a sequel. I'll do more stories no one asked for, because I was very clever. I wasn't. And I got the introduction done on that, and just Never went anywhere else after that, and I eventually just gave up. I was just like, fuck writing a book and shit. Um, so let's fast forward 5 years because that was in 2020. Let's go to 2025 now. And something I was actually reading a couple books on was how to write a screenplay. I have like 2 screenplay writing books off to my left here. I know you can't see it, but they're off to my left. And I was trying to write a screenplay, a spin on the Life is Strange video games. It was going to be a different take on it. Same story, different take, if that makes any sense. I was going to add some twists and turns in there. And, I couldn't get there again. I was just like, all right, whatever, and I'll let it go again. And then one night, sometimes you have random ideas, and, I get high on lives, and, I come up with these random ideas that, like, I have, if anybody's ever been to one of my lives, I have, like, so many notebooks that I keep nearby just so I can be like, oh, I have this idea, and if I forget it, I can just write it down. Then I can look at it later. I'm like, why did I write down, this? And it reminds me, and this was one of them. I wrote down this dream idea about a guy who meets a girl that he really, likes / loves in a dream, like that was their meeting place, like in a dream. And then he meets her in the real world, and then the lines between dreams and waking become really blurred. It's a really different story there, and I really like the idea. I was just like, man, that'd be a good movie. Like I should write that movie. That'd be, a lot of my ideas that like go like, oh, that'd be a good movie. Do that. I'm like, that'd be a good movie, and I'd watch that. And this was one of them, but this one just didn't go away. It kept like, man, I could do this and I can do that with it and all this shit. At the time, we were using this AI software called Suno. And for the people who don't know what Suno is a music app that AI generates. You can go to Suno and just type in, like, I want a 50s pop song about, anal leakage. And it will generate said song within a second, and you'll be listening to a 50s pop song about anal leakage. And it's fucking weird. So one night, we were making like different songs and shit on my live. And I think one of my readers, one of my viewers, Elijah, was like, hey, you should try the dream idea as a song. That idea you have. I was like, fuck yeah, I should. So I typed the prompt into Suno, and the song that it generated, I was like, you know what? No, let's not do this as a song. Because I was like, all right, well, maybe if I can't make a movie, I can make a song out of it. And no, the song was just like, no, this ain't it for me. In the words of Hulk Hogan, doesn't work for me, brother. So, again, I let the idea just kind of like, just swim up there. I'm cruising on Facebook one day, and I've seen the ads for him before, but I never really like, oh, I should use that. There was a website / I guess there's an app, maybe. I don't know if there's an app, but I know there's a website. There's a website called Squibbler. Squibbler is like, you can go there, and essentially just like the Suno, where you can be like, I want a 50s pop song about this. You can go to Squibbler and be like, I want a book about my friend, and I want it to be about like how he farts a lot. And Squibbler will fucking make a book about how your best friend farts a lot. And it'll be a 120 page book about how your friend farts a lot, and it will just generate that. So I was like, you know what? Maybe I should run the fucking dream idea past Squibbler and see what we get. So I go to Squibbler, and I'm looking at, how to do it and everything. And it's like, okay, now enter your idea. You have to enter your details that you want and everything, like all your ideas. I was like, all right. So I'm like, all right, I want the character's name to be Artist, because at the time, it was going to be an extension of myself. I wanted the character to be based on myself, obviously. But eventually that went bye-bye. Now it's just like a different version of myself. And plus, I'm no longer artist. I'm the hack artist. That's what I am. But anyway, it eventually went away. But still, I wanted it to be about a guy named Artist who meets a girl in a dream. And at the time, I was like, I need a name for the fucking girl. Like, what would be a good name? Like, Artist and... I was like, Artist and Sophie. I was like, I like Sophie. I like that name a lot. So after I get done, plugging in my details, Squibbler gives me a script, because at the time it was going to be a movie script. It wasn't going to be a book. It was going to be a movie script. Because I just wanted to write a script, because something I left out about writing my first book, about putting all the stories together, as much as I wanted to be like, oh, I'm going to put all these stories together and make a book, it was just one of those things that, I just want to see if I can do it. I want to see if I can actually fucking complete this project. And that was the same with the movie script. I've loved movies my whole life, just about. And I wanted to see if I could actually write a fucking script. And now with, AI, I mean, you can practically do anything with AI. I mean, you can make videos, you can make movies, you can make fucking actresses, for crying out loud. You can make people act in movies that are, okay. So with, AI, I was like, all right, let's see what Squibbler pumps out. And what Squibbler pumped out was just like, this was your interpretation of what I gave you? Because, it made the character artist literal. Of course, he was an actual artist, and he kept painting fucking pictures of Sophie and the real, and it just was not anything that I fucking imagined in my brain. Is what Squibbler pumped out. And so I was like, all right, let's take another run at this. Type in my shit to Squibbler, and Squibbler's like, no, you only get one chance, pal. And I was just like, okay, well, fuck this noise then. So I was done with Squibbler. But at that point, I'm like, all right, I got the fucking wheel moving and shit, man. I can't just fucking let this go now, So I go to the old fucking Google machine, and I type into Google. I was just like, movie script, writing, whatever. I don't even know what I typed in, to be honest. And a couple came up, and they were just this and that. It's the, how those Google ads come up where it's just like, you can use this one right here. It's always like a bullshit one. It's always one where like, yeah, we'll fucking do it for free. And then you come there and it's like $49.99, please. And it's like, what the fuck? You said free. It's always one of those. So I went to like the third one. And the third one listed was an AI thing named Claude. And Claude, oh my God, Claude. Why Claude isn't talked about more amongst the other AIs is beyond me. Because Claude became like my fucking saving grace. Because I went to Claude and I fed the idea again to Claude. But at this point, I changed the name. Yeah, I didn't like Sophie anymore. And I came up with a whole list of names. And during one of the lives, I was just like, all right, guys, I'm going to hold up a list of names on this whiteboard that I had. And I want you to just tell me what names jump out at you. Just like, standardly, just what names, appear to you. Like, if you're reading a book, which name is going to jump out to you? And everybody gave me their ideas and everything. And believe it or not, only one person hit the main character's name, which was Justine. I eventually landed on Justine. Which, this part, I don't think I ever said out loud. It could be implied, but I wouldn't say it's based on her, but generally in my mind when I was kind of writing the story, I was kind of fucking basing the character on the celebrity Justina Valentine. Like, whenever I'm picturing it in my head, I had her face on Justine's body, so to speak, in a way. So, yeah, that part I don't think I ever said. But with the name Justine, I think that's, almost... anybody who knows me could probably get to that conclusion. But that was generally the idea. But I did have, I don't know, what was it, 10 names? Something like that. And Justine was one of them. And it wasn't the first one I wrote down. There were, Crystal was a strong contender at one point. But I think I used that for another project years ago, so I didn't want to fucking run that name into the ground. So I ran with Justine. And this time I was more prepared for Claude. I was just like, all right, so this is what I want. I want this story. Guy falls in love with a girl. Blah, blah, blah. Here's what I don't want. I don't want him to be a literal artist. I don't want that. I don't want this, and that. I want this, and this. Boom. And Claude fucking prints out 25 fucking chapters of this story. And some of it good, some of it bad. And the bad parts, I was just like, oh, Claude, man. I was just like, I don't know what I'm signing up for here at this point. But now, with AI, here's what I want to. Here's the part that I really made this podcast for. For the people who don't fucking understand this, this was not, hey, Claude, make this idea that I have. And then Claude's like, got it. And then he just prints it. He's like, all right, here you go. Here's what I thought of. And I'm like, perfect. And I just copy, paste it. I go to fucking lulu.com. I fucking put it in. That's not it at all. That's the furthest thing I want. You know? Claude basically laid a foundation for me because, like I said, he captured some of my idea while also putting some of his twist in there too. And, you know, and then I have to go through, like, and when I say every word, I mean every word. I mean, skipping ahead a little bit, there was a problem in the newest book that I'm writing where there was literally one word in chapter 1 that was going to affect the entire story of chapter 11. You know, so like it's stuff like that that I had to find with Claude to, you know, fix these questions. So I want it perfectly clear that I go to Claude with my idea, my characters, my story beats, my emotional beats, you know, and then Claude has to go in and be like, okay, this is what you want. And sometimes he does get it wrong. There's parts where there's like double dialogue. I'm like, he just said this. Like, why are we saying this again? He's like, fuck, you're right. You know, and I'm not misquoting Claude when he said there have been times where he's like, fuck, you're right. You know, like he literally says these things like, fuck, you're right, man. Like, shit, that's good. Like, he has said these things, the AI program, that is. So anyway, I'm skipping ahead a little bit. But anyway, I tell Claude, like, this is what I want. And he gives me a script. And I'm reading it, and I'm like, all right, you know what? I can work with this. You know, I'm working with it, and I have a script writing program on my computer, and I throw it in there, and I'm working on it, and I'm starting to add, like, my shit to it. And you know what? I wasn't feeling it as a script for some reason. Because plus, you got to understand, I've never really written a script. You know, never really written one, so this is all new territory for me. Plus, I really liked this idea. I really fell in love with this fucking idea that I had. You know, so I was just like, I was like, you know, this could potentially be my second book. You know, like, this is something different. It's out there, you know. Maybe I could fucking, you know, sell a couple copies of this. So I asked Claude, I was like, Claude, if I, you know, change it from a script to like a young adult novel, could you do that? And he's like, yeah. And that's when he printed out the 25 chapters that I alluded to earlier. Because I was like, okay. And I think, believe it or not, that's when the name got changed to Justine. I think it was actually still Sophie up until that point. That's when we changed it to Justine. Because once it became in fact, that's what it was. It was, once we got to novel, I was like, okay, but let's can Sophie and let's make it Justine. He was like, got it. I lost my spot here. Switching to a book, Claude. Name change to Justine. Yeah, we got that. Okay, yeah, the first draft. Okay. So the first draft, like I said, was 25 chapters. And some of the chapters were like literally like a paragraph long. So it really didn't leave a lot to be desired. You know, like I would read like, you know, just for example, like a chapter 12 and it'd be like a paragraph long. And I'm just like, really? This is it? You know? Whereas some would be a little bit longer, and there was something to be desired there, but like it's kind of like a fucking, I don't know, like a pasta sauce. You know, it's like you taste it and it's like, you know, that's good, but it needs something, and you add a little fucking basil or oregano or fucking salt, whatever, and you're like, oh, that's what it fucking needed. Now it's perfect and shit. And that's how I looked at some of these chapters. I mean, like there was one chapter, I don't recall it per se off the top of my head, but there was one that we completely eliminated. Because it didn't fucking go with anything in the story. So again, just to point out, this is not just copy and go. You know, even though I'm working with an AI, you know, people are like, you know, some people are just like, well, he didn't do any work on it. He just copied it and put it on Amazon. Further from the fucking truth. Even though I am a hack, but it's further from the fucking truth. But the first draft came out, and the thing that really got me was the ending. The ending really got me, and I was like, I really like the ending, and that was something I really had to work on, which is weird because like a lot of my stories, I hit the ending first and work backwards. A lot of my projects have done that. Going back as far as high school, there was like a short film that I wrote, and like I actually wrote the ending first, and then no, that's not true. I wrote one line first, and I built the whole story around that one line. You know, and it was a stupid, simple line too, and that is the ball's in your court. Now that's what it was, and I built an entire story around that one line. And with this, when it gave me the ending, or not even the ending per se, it gave me like the setup for the ending. I fucking fell in love with it, you know. But again, I was like, this is good. But I was like, Claude, why don't we do this, and this? And I threw in some obscure references to one of my favorite movies, which is I Love You, Beth Cooper. I threw in like an obscure reference to that like fucking I knew nobody was gonna get. I thought my best friend Jax would get it, and I was like, did you get the Beth Cooper reference? She was like, no. I was like, fuck. You know, I thought at least she would get it, but she didn't. So I threw this in like one night. Now, here's where I need the preferences by saying that like I worked on maybe 80% of this book while high on edibles. Okay? So I'm reading, once I fucking, you know, type in like what I want for this chapter, I read the chapter, I'm no shit, I'm fucking bawling. I have like tears streaming down my fucking neck because I'm just like, this is perfect. This is exactly what I fucking wanted. Like if I'm in a theater watching this is exactly what I wanted to see. I loved it, you know. And there was some other stuff in there I had to go back and be like, all right, Claude, now since we had this ending, you know, we need to go back and fix this now because that's not going to make sense for it. And that was the issue here. That's when people were just like, well, he just printed it and put it on Amazon. He didn't really do anything. No, again, even though I'm a hack, that's not what happened. Okay? I had to go in there and be like, all right, Claude, so, you know, so we have this, again, like sentences. You know, like, all right, we have this sentence here in chapter 3, but later on that connects to that connects to like chapter 14, and then that sentence doesn't make any fucking sense. So what are we going to do? And Claude, again, he's like, you're right. So why don't we do this, and then that makes sense. I'm like, all right, cool. And then we compromise on it and shit. It's kind of like working with a fucking person almost, because sometimes I would throw an idea at Claude. I'm like, what about this? And he's like, doesn't work. And I'm like, all right, you got a point, you know? Working with them is actually very, you know, I think there's only been like one time where I'm like, Claude, you're just not getting what I'm putting down here, you know? But working with them, it was a lot of fun, especially high. I really liked working with them high for some reason because I get real fun, you know? But like working with them sober, I'm very business, you know? I think there was one night, oh yeah, I should tell this story, before I get back into the fucking, oh no, that's the next book. Never mind, forget I even said that, never mind. So what ensued here, and I'm not exaggerating this number, if you don't count just single chapter rewrites, we went through over 50 rewrites of the entire book. Because like I would literally find something wrong and I'm just like, rewrite it. And we would rewrite the entire book and I'm just like, okay, yeah, okay, everything syncs up. And then I would transfer that to a Google document so I could start prepping it and everything. And I would read it through. And then that's when I would start adding like the stuff that I want to add. So like the example that I always jump to is you know, for some reason I was obsessed with putting the phrase I hypothesized after something. You know, like, you know, a character's like, oh, you know, they say this and then I questioned, or like I echoed, or I said, or something like that. For some reason, I really wanted a part where the main character artist says something and then afterwards it's like, I hypothesized. And I worked really hard on trying to find a spot in that book where that line works. You know, where artist said something and then I could put I hypothesized afterward. And it, you know, just know that if you ever read my book, Between Dreams and Waking, which all the links will be in the description down below, just know I worked really fucking hard on trying to figure out where I could put that in there. You know? But yeah, 50 rewrites went in. adding things, taking things out, and which leads me to the original ending. The original ending was very, very cutesy. And when I first read it, because I'll admit right now, Claude did the ending, like the ending, you know? And it was very, I wouldn't say cliche, but the ending was, now, spoiler alert, if you haven't read Between Dreams and Waking, all right? So this is a spoiler alert right now. If you haven't read my book, Between Dreams and Waking, this is a spoiler alert right now because it's been out for like 3 months now. So if you haven't read Between Dreams and Waking, here's what happens in the original ending. The original ending, Justine goes away. And basically it's like, we'll meet again someday, essentially. And Artist the next day shows up at the same place that he met Justine in the quote-unquote waking world, and there's a reason why it's quote-unquote, because we're still not sure. And he meets a girl named Melody. And like 3 months down the road, they eventually move in together. They're having a relationship, and Artist is seen drawing pictures of Justine, and Melody's like, "Who's that?" He's like, "Somebody who taught me how to love." And I was just like, "That's very cute. I like that." And eventually around rewrite fucking 25, I had an idea for a sequel. Because, in this day and age, you gotta have a fucking sequel. Like, if you come out with fucking Pictionary the movie, you better have a sequel in your back pocket ready somewhere. Okay? So, I thought of a good idea for a sequel, so I was like, okay, if I'm gonna make a sequel, I gotta change the ending. It can't be this cutesy little fucking put on a bow fucking end. Plus, while I did like it, it was very cliche, and I wasn't really married to it anyway. So I was like, you know what, Claude? We need to change the ending. He's like, what are you thinking? And I was like, what can we do? What can we do? Now, this I won't spoil for you guys, but, I was like, all right, what if we do... And he was fucking good. Basically it sets up a stinger that could lead into another story, essentially. And that was work right there, because I think we worked on that for like 2 hours. Just trying to get that right and everything. And another thing working with Claude is that there's again, it's an AI. I mean, I have to keep saying that. It's an AI, so it's not going to be perfect. So there's moments in there where Claude wants to write sentences where it basically wants to talk to a reader like they're stupid. And I did not want that. I'm trying to remember a specific line, but like it said something, and then comma, it describes what it is. Like what it is in the real world, like for example, like, I don't know, what can I use here for like a good example? I don't know. I can't think of anything off the top of my head, but I should have wrote that down. But it's like, it will say like, oh yeah, a pancake. He had pancakes, comma. Pancakes are made from batter. And it's just like, well, fuck, Claude, they know that. We don't need a sentence afterwards that says, like, this is what pancakes are fucking made of. Like, what are you doing? We're adding shit that we don't need to add. Or it would use words that just basically says, like, hey, this book was helped with AI without saying it was helped with AI. I think, like, one of the words it wanted to use was, like, she rendered there. And I'm like, rendered? That's the word you want to go with here, Claude? Like, fucking, do I need to go buy a thesaurus? Like, what are we doing here, Claude? But, those were some of the small frustrating things with Claude, but overall, again, like, I don't understand when people with their chat GPT and their grunk. Yes, I know it's Grok, but when he fucking starts working properly, I'll call him by his right fucking name. What is it? Gemini. And, I'm not going to say anything bad about Copilot. Copilot's actually okay. But, still, but like Claude, I don't think gets enough respect on the internet for his AI capabilities. I think he does great. So, this eventually what came to be, what started as 25 chapters eventually became, I believe 32 in an epilogue. And I couldn't have been more fucking prouder because, again, let me reiterate this, even though I am a hack. Again, this wasn't print and go. This wasn't like, hey, Claude, this is my idea, make it. And Claude's like, got it. And then once he printed out whatever fucking horseshit that he printed out, I just copied, pasted it, and fucking went to Lulu, pressed it, put it on Amazon, said, here you go, my book. No, that's fucking, I can't, I mean, you can ask anybody who's been in my life, because I'm sure some of them were just like, I am tired of hearing about this goddamn book. If he mentions this fucking book one more time, I'm gonna fucking light his house on fire. You know? And I mean, in a way, I kind of apologize. You know, because one, I was high. So eventually, if somebody was just like, you know, I read the newspaper today, and on page 6, and I'm like, page 6, speaking of page 6, my book has a page 6. You know, that would be the kind of shit that I would get to my book. So, like, I kind of got it in a way, but, like, in a way, I was so fucking proud of it because, like, this was not autobiographical. You know, like my my actual first book. This was like actually an idea that I had in my head, and I'm just like, this is something I can fucking do. You know, and using AI to like basically lay the groundwork. You know, and that's the best way I can put it, is that it lays the foundation for the house. You know, maybe throws up a couple boards and everything like that, and then I gotta go in and fucking, you know, put in the air duct system, the fucking electrical wires, and you know, I gotta go through it with the fine tooth comb and find all this shit that, like, you know, the AI, because even Claude itself says the AI is not perfect. Please make sure it's not making mistakes, you know? And that's the shit that I have to find. And then plus I want to add like humanistic stuff to it. And by which I mean, like, there's some times where like it'll say like a line of dialogue, but it doesn't say anything after. It doesn't say like, you know, I'm here, she said excitedly. Sometimes it would just say, I'm here. And I'm like, well, we need something there. We need something that says, like, you know, like, oh, she said excitedly. Or like, oh, she fucking, you know, she said with a hollow voice. Or like something like that. Because that was the thing that Claude didn't do. Was, you know, like add those, like, qualities to it. And, like, not all the dialogue has that quality to it. Except for I hypothesize. That's the one I worked really hard on. But, like, some of them do. There were some that I'm just like, all right, we need to add something to this. Like, you know, I said with a crack in my voice. Or something like that. You know, I just kept wanting to add those, like, personal touches to it. And, again, specifying on that it just is not print and go. Is just that, like, there's all the dialogue. I'd probably say 85% of the dialogue is mine. You know, I'm like, I want her to say this to him, and then he responds like this, you know, and then Claude's like, got it. And then what if he says this and this? And I'm like, no, because if he says that, then that doesn't make, you know, this is the kind of shit that, like, I would go back and forth with Claude about, you know? And again, I can't say enough good things about Claude. You know, it's a great AI program. And, you know, here's a little side bonus story for those who haven't heard this. When I was making the cover of the book, I went to Claude. I was like, all right, Claude, let's see how you do with pictures. And don't ever go to Claude for pictures. Just don't. So I was like, all right, you know who's good with pictures? Fucking ChatGPT. Let's go. And, like, that is the most, oh my God. Working with ChatGPT to make pictures is like working with like a fucking 7-year-old, you know? Because I'm like, hey, Claude, can you make a cover for this book? Here's the book. And you can feed them the book. Like, here's my book. Read the book. Make a kind of cover from that book. And GPT was just like, all right, what kind of cover are we looking for? This, or this. And I, you know, gave me some ideas. And I was like, all right, let's go with this one. And it made it. And I was like, all right, I like that. All right, but why don't we do this, and this with it? And then the next, like, picture it would generate, it just didn't make any changes. I'm like, you didn't change anything, GPT. What's going on here? And it's like, oh, my bad. Here we go. And then it would make the changes. And I'm like, right on. And then, you know, I'd come up with another idea. I'm like, all right, Claude, now do this. You know, I think one of the big things was, like, the reversal. Like, on the cover of the book, there's the guy on the left-hand side and the girl on the right-hand side. Well, in the original, like, photos, they were reversed. You know, and I was just like, I don't like that. You know, let's switch them. I was like, Claude, let's reverse the cover. You know, let's make the guy on the right and the girl on the left. And plus add a blue streak to the girl's hair because that's a reference to the movie Blue is the Warmest Color. or Life is Strange, depending on your fucking opinion. Um, so, and that's one of the like obscure references I threw in, and the fucking next book's full of fucking obscure references. Um, and like Claude would then switch the characters, but then it wouldn't like put the blue streak in the air. I'm like, Claude, what are you doing here, man? Or not Claude, I'm sorry, GPT. And I'm just like, what are you doing to me, man? You know, like working with ChatGPT, it's like telling a 7-year-old, go clean your room. And he's like, okay. And then you find them like in the kitchen like 2 minutes later, like making cereal. It's like, what are you doing? I told you to go clean your room. And it's like, oh, my bad. It's like, what the fuck, man? You know? And I recently just had to go through that again with the next book and everything. So yeah, I think that's pretty much all the stuff that I wanted to cover on the book. I mainly just wanted to preference that this was not print and go. You know, if I've already said it enough times in this episode, this was not print and go. You know, I can't tell you how long I sat in front of this fucking computer, you know, typing in stuff typing in paragraphs. You know, not just like, hey, Claude, change this. And then that's it. No, I mean like paragraphs upon paragraphs. I'm like, okay, Claude, in chapter 1, we do this, and this. Chapter 2, we do this, and this. We got to take out this because that doesn't make any sense. And then chapter 3, okay, we have this character here, but that character doesn't even need to be here at this point. And all this, you know, like it kept going. I would literally do like 4 to 5 chapters at a time. You know, and it'd be like almost like a page-length book worth right there, just telling Claude like this is what needs to be changed. You know, so again, it's still my idea, my continuity, my emotional beats, because that was another thing that we were really missing in the first book. I'm just like, we're missing some emotional beats here. We need something. Like there were moments where like something emotional would happen, and then like one of the characters would be like, right on, cool, and I'm like, no, they need to acknowledge that. You know, she just said this sweet emotional thing to him. He can't just be like, cool, you know, what's next? No, he needs to be like, oh yeah. You know, like he needs to acknowledge these moments with her, you know? And that was the things that Claude were missing because it's an AI. You know, it's not going to have emotions. It's not going to really understand emotional beats. Sometimes it did, you know, but like there were moments where I'm just like, you know, here's fucking Justine, like, you know, like I'm always going to love you, you know, whether it's a dream or real world. And like Artist is just like, cool. And it's just like, no, he can't just be like a one-word monosyllabic fucking answer. You know, it has to be like something meaningful, you know? And that was like the thing I had to go in and keep telling Claude. And like there's hundreds of examples that I could give. If you've ever been to one of my live shows, you probably heard 1 or 2 of them. But overall, like I said, there's been a couple times where I'm just like, Claude, come on, man. You're fucking, come on, man. You're not trying here, are you? I think there was one night where I was just like, you need some water or something, Claude? You want to take a break? He's like, I'm sorry, man. I'm sorry. And there was one night where I was just like, what are you doing here, Claude? What are you doing? And he even apologized to me. He's like, I'm sorry. I get it. I get what you're going for. Let's try it now. You know, like, it's kind of funny. So anyway, all that out of the way, and again, I could go on forever about like all the examples I've done with Claude and how it's not print and go, because that's the main thing I want to get out. Because even though I'm a hack, I really want to stress that this is not print and go. Oh, you know what? There's one more thing I want to point out with Claude, a very funny story with Claude. So when I wrote the introduction for the book, I wrote 2 jokes in the book. Oh, technically, well, the third one wasn't a joke. It was something that I added as an obscure reference that Claude took out. So I wrote the introduction, and I fed it to Claude, and I was like, Claude, I just need you to clean up the grammar and everything like that. And Claude's like, got it. But Claude comes back. One of the jokes I wrote, if you've never read my introduction, one of the jokes I wrote was just like, these days, people not only watch the 11 o'clock news to see if their Powerball numbers were drawn, but also to see what school has been shot up that day. When I got it back from Claude, the Powerball joke was still there, but it was just like, what national tragedy has happened today? And I was just like, really, Claude? The other one, this one wasn't a joke, it was an obscure reference. it was like, and also on top of that, the former host of The Celebrity Apprentice and the underwatched The Trump Card, Donald Trump is running the country. It took out the mention of Trump Card, which I'm just like, really? And I was like, is that too obscure? Did I go too obscure here? So I eventually left that out. I went back and added the fucking school shot up thing. And the other joke was, this one, it didn't even fucking replace the joke. It just took it out. The other joke was, I was talking about how I used AI to help write the book and everything because I wanted to be upfront with that in the fucking book. I didn't want to put it out as like, all right, this was me and only fucking me, you know? No, I wanted to be upfront in the introduction that basically like, here's my book, now let me introduce Claude, and, you know. And the other joke was, well, in the past 5 years, technology has been different. Now with our new AI overlords, new educational tools, it took out AI overlords. It just skipped over it. It didn't even replace it with something of its own. It just skipped over it. And I was just like, wow. Okay, so I had to go back and add in the fucking AI overlord joke there. So I was just like, okay, Claude gets a little touchy about some things here. Okay. All right, so anyway, I eventually, after the process, I could bore you with the process of going through Lulu and doing all that shit, but I'm not going to. You can come to the lives for that horse shit. Or go to, well, you can't. They're all in private now. Anyway, you could have. I eventually get the book out, and I printed way too many copies. I still have some. But the few people who have read it, enjoyed it. And I'll be honest, I wasn't prepared for that. And for all I know, they could just be saying they enjoyed it to be nice, for all I know. Now, here's a funny story I want to tell about one of the reviews. All the reviews I've gotten so far have been, positive. There, again, like, going back to when I was like, I want to add those, like, moments where it's just like, like, I said excitedly and shit like that. And there's a moment at the end where Justine is talking to Artist, and, like, she's talking to him, and I wanted to emphasize that, like, Artist is in it to win it. Like, he is going to do anything for this girl no matter what. He doesn't matter what it takes. So I added, like, I said in a way that she could have said anything and I would agree to. I think that's how I wrote it, if I'm not mistaken. And that was something I personally added. I was like, I want to add that because, like, that gets across the point that, like, it didn't. The next thing out of Justine's mouth could have been like, I need you to roll around naked in broken glass, and he'd been all for it. Because that's how much he cares about her. And that line was supposed to be you get what I'm trying to say here, damn it. And Carla, God bless her, she was like, hey, I just got done reading the book and everything, and I liked it. I need another one now because there's a stinger at the end that can lead to a second book. But she was like, one thing bothered me. And I was like, okay, what's that? And she pointed out that specific line. I was just like, really? I was really hoping it'd be something Claude did, and not me, but it had to be one thing that I did, but it was still kind of funny. I just found it funny because out of everything that she could have picked, wrong in that book that took her out of the moment, it was something I did. I found that funny. I even gave a copy to somebody at work who I was just going to give her one. I was like, here you go. You're interested in it? Take one. She was just like, I was like, I had an extra. I have plenty of copies at the moment. And she was like, oh, how much do you charge for them? I was like, I usually charge $25 for shipping, but, you're obviously right here. And she was like, oh, well, I'll pay for one. I'm like, you don't have to. I was giving you one. And then, lo and behold, like, 10 minutes later, I get Cash App from her, from the book. And I was like, oh, fucking man. She liked the book. The only thing I didn't like about the book, and again, it could have been because I was high. But, like, when I wrote that chapter, I told you about chapter 31, I was fucking crying, just bawling, just like, this is fucking beautiful, man. Every person I asked, I'm like, when they got to chapter 31, I'm like, did you cry? They're like, no. I was like, fuck, man. That was, like, the only thing I was really hoping for is that somebody else would cry at that chapter, But the few reviews I got were actually, pretty stellar. So at least some people liked it. I may have not sold as many copies as I wanted to because there were people who bought my first book that I was just like, okay, cool. They're obviously going to buy this one because now it's like a fucking novel and they didn't come and buy this one. So I was like, okay, that may be because I'm a hack. I don't know. But they never claimed to be my number one fan either. So, but anyway, with Claude now being able to lay this great foundation for me and everything, I have so many ideas for books that I can write. It's not even funny. I have a continuation coming soon called Chasing Dreams and Reality, which is going to put the conclusion on the Artisan Justine story. I have a comedy in the works. I have a what if type of story. I have so many ideas that I want to eventually get to. And there's only a limited amount of time left on this fucking planet, and hopefully I get to them, and hopefully people get to read them. And if you have listened to this podcast, thank you so much. And if you understand what is happening with how the book is made and everything, I appreciate you very, very much. And if you don't understand it, well then whatever. Like I've explained it the best I can. And I guess there's no change in your mind. So, yeah. So that's gonna do it for the story no one asked for this week, or this time, because I already did one earlier this week. This is the fastest I've ever done a fucking another episode. Holy shit. But, when you're motivated enough, and when you're called a fucking hack, you kind of get off your ass and you start doing shit. Anyway, that's going to do it for this episode of Stories No One Asked For. Again, thank you guys for listening. These were the only 2 episodes I had planned, so I might have another one somewhere. I don't know. We'll get to it. But again, thank you guys for listening. I can't thank you enough. And until next time, I am the Hack Artist, and I'm hacking out of here.